The Headless People, a mystery history forgot. Imagine how ancient people understood the world. For them, maps were not just lines and borders. Manuscripts were not merely geography. They were entire universes, filled with lands both real and unreal, animals both familiar and terrifying, and people who challenged the very definition of what it meant to be human. On the same pages where elephants, lions, and serpents were carefully drawn, something far stranger appeared again and again. Human figures, standing upright, walking, fighting, yet lacking heads entirely. Their eyes and mouths were shown not above the shoulders, but embedded directly into their chests. Today, we casually label these images as myths. Artistic exaggerations. Primitive misunderstandings. But what if that assumption is wrong? What if these images were not fantasy, but testimony? To explore this mystery, we must return not to legends, but to the foundations of recorded history itself. The father of history and the headless men. Herodotus, often called the father of history, lived in the 5th century BCE. His work, the Histories, is not a book of fairy tales. It is one of the earliest attempts to systematically record the known world using evidence, reports, and eyewitness accounts. While describing the distant regions of Libya, modern North Africa, Herodotus carefully lists the inhabitants and animals of the land. He mentions massive serpents, elephants, wild beasts, and then, without pause or explanation, he adds something extraordinary. He describes people with the heads of dogs. And others who had no heads at all, whose eyes, he says, were located in their chests. There is no metaphor. No warning to the reader. No hint of skepticism. He lists them exactly as he lists lions and bears. For Herodotus, this was information gathered from sources he trusted. Roman science repeats the claim. Centuries later, the Roman scholar Pliny the Elder echoed the same description. Pliny's Natural History was the most comprehensive scientific encyclopedia of the ancient world. It catalogued plants, animals, minerals, geography, and human cultures. And in this scientific work, Pliny describes a people known as the Blemmyes. He writes plainly. They are said to have no heads, their eyes and mouths being located in their breasts. Again, no poetry. No mythic framing. Just documentation. Two of the most respected minds of antiquity, separated by centuries, reporting the same impossible anatomy. Too many witnesses to ignore. Skeptics often suggest a simple explanation. Perhaps travelers encountered African tribes wearing ritual masks on their chests. Perhaps cloaks concealed their heads, creating an illusion from a distance. But this explanation collapses under scrutiny. Are we to believe that countless merchants, soldiers, diplomats, and explorers, all across generations, were fooled by the same costume trick? And more importantly, why do these descriptions appear alongside many other equally strange peoples? The headless were not alone. Ancient texts describe one-legged people who shaded themselves with their giant foot. People with animal-like legs. Men with dog heads who spoke and lived in organized societies. These were not isolated errors. They were part of a larger worldview. A global pattern, not a local myth. If these stories existed only in Greece or Rome, we might dismiss them as cultural imagination. But they don't. The same image appears across civilizations that had no contact with one another. India. In the Ramayana, a powerful being named Kabanda is described as headless, with a single eye and mouth embedded in his torso. He was once divine, but cursed into this form. China. In ancient Chinese mythology, the warrior Xing Tian was beheaded by the Yellow Emperor. Yet he continued fighting, his nipples becoming eyes, his navel a mouth. Japan. Folklore speaks of a headless spirit whose face appears on its chest, encountered on lonely roads as an omen of death. Different cultures. Different languages. Same image. This is not coincidence. Medieval Europe keeps the story alive. As ancient knowledge passed into medieval monasteries, monks preserved these accounts. Bestiaries, travel books, and illustrated manuscripts continued to depict headless people as real inhabitants of distant lands. Even Alexander the Great, in medieval romances, was said to have encountered headless tribes during his eastern campaigns. Some stories claim he captured several and brought them back as proof. To the medieval mind, this was not fantasy. It was geography. A Renaissance explorer confirms the legend. Then comes the most unsettling testimony of all. In 1596, during the Age of Discovery, Sir Walter Raleigh published the discovery of Guyana. Raleigh was not a monk or mythmaker. He was a navigator, soldier, and scholar. And he wrote that in South America, along the riverbanks of the interior, lived a people known locally as the Yuapanoma, headless men with faces in their chests. He insisted this was common knowledge among locals. He cited Spanish eyewitnesses. And Renaissance maps soon included illustrations of these beings. Then, suddenly, the report stopped. After thousands of years, silence. Where did they go? This raises an unsettling question. If these beings never existed, why were they reported for millennia? And if they did exist, why did they vanish completely? Modern science offers one explanation: rare genetic conditions. Short necks. Severe deformities. Isolated populations. But this fails to explain the consistency, the global repetition, and the symbolic precision of the descriptions. So other theories emerge. Were they created? Some ancient texts speak of forbidden knowledge. The Book of Enoch describes fallen angels teaching humanity sciences that corrupted life itself, producing unnatural beings and hybrids. What if these stories preserve distorted memories of lost technologies? Not magic, but ancient science far beyond our understanding. Were the headless not born, but made? Or were they never physical at all? There is another explanation, perhaps the most disturbing. Throughout history, empires have dehumanized their enemies. Romans called Celts barbarians. Medieval Europe portrayed Eastern peoples as demons. Turning humans into monsters makes violence feel righteous. What if the headless were not anatomical, but symbolic? To be headless is to be without reason. Without identity. Without will. The perfect slave. The final meaning. A head is not just anatomy. It is thought. Memory. Selfhood. To remove it, literally or symbolically, is total domination. Perhaps the headless man is not a creature of flesh, but a warning. A reminder of how easily humanity can be stripped of identity, by power, propaganda, fear, or control. And that may be why this image has haunted civilizations across the world for thousands of years. Because the greatest monster has never been something inhuman. It has always been what humans can turn each other into.